Welcome to Install from Heap, a Netrunner podcast from Rattlebox Games about jank, deck building, and cyberpunk nonsense. I'm Brendan Riley. Episode 9, Netrunner Etiquette. Introduction. Etiquette is a strange bit of human behavior. It's like a set of rules that we know we should follow, but we're not really required to. It's not the same as laws, but it's the glue that holds society together. Right? It's the thing that says don't cut in line. It's the thing that says hold the door open for somebody if they're walking close behind you. It's the thing that makes you write a thank you note to your aunt even though you didn't like the present she gave you. Although I love the presents my aunts give me. So I wanted to talk a little bit today about etiquette, about the way that we engage with the game of Netrunner, both in person and online. As somebody who plays some games in person, but a lot of games online, I have to deal with this question. And as a casual player, I don't have the same set of hard and fast rules that somebody who goes to a tournament might have. So actually, this theme was suggested by listener C&H Schmidt from BoardGameGeek. So thanks for that, and I hope you enjoy. I wanted to start today with a little bit of a recursion, looking back at some previous decks that I've talked about. In particular, I wanted to give you listeners an update on my Wait For It deck, the How I Met Your Mother deck that I introduced in the last episode. I've actually gotten to play it quite a few times, both online and in person a little bit, and I've been tweaking it a little. I've managed to keep to the theme of How I Met Your Mother themed cards, which means I still have some cards in there that aren't great, but I've cut some of the deadwood. Builder is gone. I've changed some of the agendas a bit, but it's starting to work a little bit better now. I've managed to make stints in fire a few times. I had one game where I got 39 credits in one turn by using Brian Stinson to process two restructures and a hedge fund in one turn. It really creates a good swing. And if you're careful, then you have money for a mid-season replacements and perhaps a couple scorches or a boom. That's hard to do, though, depending on how well your opponent is doing on keeping their meat damage protection in place. Particularly Citadel Sanctuary is a tough nut to crack. I have also found Chief Slee to be a really interesting card. I had one game where I should have won with it, but I wasn't paying attention and I kind of forgot to put tokens on it. And by the time I realized that it was supposed to, we were far enough along that the runner would have responded differently had I put tokens on, so we just let it go. But having Chief Slee on the board and then letting a runner faceplant into a hive or something can be a really good way to win a kind of janky game. So the Wait For It deck is coming along. Segment 1, Deck Building. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about a deck I've been working on, but I haven't really had much chance to play with, and that's a deck in the Haas Bioroid window, the Architects of Tomorrow.
The world's a lot bigger than you think. It's not these four walls, or even a city or country. You have the ability to build it, to create it, to discover it. Build the world you want to live in, one brick at a time. Be the architects of tomorrow.
In particular, I've been working on a deck that uses Jeeves model Bioroids. Jeeves is an asset. It's a unique asset, so it does come under fire from Rumor Mill. But it's got this nifty thing where if you have it on the table and you res it before you take your actions, and then you take 3 of the same kind of action, then you get 1 more click. So Jeeves can be a really good way to allow you to score a naked 4-2 from table. It can also give you a number of other options, depending if you just plan your turn carefully. And I think Jeeves is really helpful. It makes for a really fun kind of janky HB deck. But it's not quite as good as I was hoping, because there's a new agenda that just came out that I was really hoping to use, and it turns out I can't. At least not the way I wanted to. The new agenda from the Quorum data pack is called Sensor Net Activation. And it says, place one agenda counter on sensor net activation when you score it. It's a 3-1 Haas Bioroid agenda. Hosted agenda counter. Res a Bioroid, ignoring all costs. When the turn ends, de-res that Bioroid. That first half is great. The idea you score a 3-1, which it's not fun to have 3-1s in your deck. And then you get to res a Bioroid, ignoring all costs. So you could have a big, trappy Bioroid sitting in your deck, and you could res it, sort of like a Howler, only you can wait until the runner is engaged to res it. It's a good thing. But then you have to de-res the Bioroid. So you get one shot with it. It's just not, it's not a great effect for the level of importance that an agenda counter should have. When I first saw this card, I thought to myself that I had the answer to how to use the card. My first thought was that you could use the same trick to swap the card that people have been using with exchange of information. Or perhaps you could forfeit the agenda for something like an archer, and then the second half wouldn't fire. So consider this example. You score sensor net activation. You spend the agenda counter to res a really expensive Bioroid, say a Wotan. And then you forfeit the agenda to do something like to res an archer or some other similarly interesting thing. Or there's a number of cards that will work when you forfeit an agenda. In my head, I said then that Bioroid should not be de-resed. Unfortunately, through a fair amount of conversation, I've come to understand that because the res a Bioroid when the turn ends, de-res that Bioroid, all of that is part of a single action that was paid for by using the hosted agenda counter. And after that card is removed from the table, the action still resolves as it would have. The breaking news action that allows the 2 tags to stay if you swap it or discard it comes from the fact that the remove the 2 tags at the end of the turn are actually a different action than the placing the tags when you score it. So that's kind of a bummer because it seemed like it would be a really great janky combo, and that's not going to work. So I'm still working on my Architects of Tomorrow deck. If you have some ideas about how to make this ID work, you'll recall it's the ID that allows you to res a Bioroid for -4 whenever an opponent encounters a Bioroid or passes one, something like that. I'm interested to see what decks are working or what tricks or janky ideas you're using. So post those in the comments on BoardGameGeek or over on Reddit. Segment 2, Executive Bootcamp. The Polite Netrunner. There's a Tumblr, which seems to have existed for just a little while and is now sitting there as part of the cemetery of the future, or the cemetery of the internet, that was built on an interesting premise called Netrunner Etiquette, Joint Bookkeeping Practices for Serious and Sportsmanlike Runners and Corps. And it seems like the basic philosophy is that players should get the money that they're owed, or spend the money that they're owed, even if they forget to use it. For example, they have a picture of the Sundew, which says the first time a runner spends at least 1 click on his or her turn, gain 2 credits, unless the runner just initiated a run on this server. Suggested etiquette. If Corp has Sundew resed, and runner takes any action during their turn other than running on the server where the Sundew is installed, runner reminds Corp that they should take 2 credits. Now, at the heart of all of the advice is this exact thing, this idea that there are things that are supposed to happen in the game that you have to remember to do. And if you fail to remember to do it, then you're out some money. And the player providing the opponent should try to remind their opponent that this is happening. Now, I've personally benefited from this. I had a game where actually it came down to me winning or losing, and I had forgotten to take my pad campaign money. And my opponent said, yeah, go ahead and take it. He said that knowing that I was going to win the game because I had that extra credit. And he let me do it anyway, or encouraged me to, which I thought was really nice of him, and I try to play the same way. You know, it just makes for a more fun game. If you know your opponent is playing at the level they should be, getting the things they should get, it makes for a more interesting experience. It makes for more fun. Of course, that's not necessarily true if you're playing in a tournament or somewhere where the winning and losing matters more than just a game. Generally, I think Netrunner is more fun if you help one another have the best game you can have, and that includes getting all the money that you're supposed to be getting for the assets you put down. Now, the more experienced you are as a player, the less help you should need with this, but I think everybody can use a hand. So I wanted to talk about this etiquette a little bit because one of the listeners had said that they are a little hesitant to go into gentechie.net to play, and they wanted to see what advice I had about how to play.
I've got a little problem.
All right, Miss Vivian, one more time. Dinner napkin.
Dinner napkin, lay gently in the lap.
Good. Elbows off the table. Don't slouch. Shrimp fork. Salad fork. Dinner fork.
I definitely have the salad fork. The rest of the silverware is a little confusing.
If you get nervous, just count the times. 4 times dinner fork. Sometimes there are 3 times the salad fork.
Now, I believe that I asked for advice on Stimhack maybe, or on the maybe on the Stimhack Slack channel. I thought that I had done so, but I cannot for the life of me find the advice now. If you had offered me some advice on this subject, and I'm taking it without crediting you, that's why. I apologize for not taking better notes, and I shall endeavor to do better in the future. So here's my advice for the Jinteki.net etiquette, and I would say this advice was offered by other people as well, and I echo it all. So I don't take originality credit for any of this. The first couple of things are to let the opponent know, and frankly, gauge for yourself how genial your opponent is going to be. When you first connect in Jinteki.net, you're going to make a game if you don't see one already waiting there, and you can pick Corp or Runner, and then you wait. And when someone connects, I usually just type hello, and I see if they respond. That if they respond, that shows they're engaged in more than just a I'm churning through games and trying to test a deck kind of way. If someone were to not respond, I might wait a moment and see what happens, but that puts me on the edge that they're maybe not going to be super friendly. Once the game starts, you should always say good luck and have fun, or some variant of that. Sometimes people will put GLHF, or you can say you too if the other person says it first. But you should definitely have that kind of sentiment in the beginning of your game. I also try to chat a little bit. Usually during the other person's turn, I'll say, so where in the world are you? Or something like that. It's just, it's nice to get to know the opponent, the person you're playing against a little bit. It helps you see them more as a person. So I like to be chatty, but I also am not too cranky if people aren't very chatty, because it takes away from the game itself, and people are there to play the game. In general, I also try to play like real life. So if in real life you forgot to take your pad campaign money, well, you can't in Jinteki.net, it will take it for you. But, if there were places where you forgot to do something, let's say you have some recurring credits for on a trace, and then you forget to spend them when you're doing the trace and you spend regular money instead. I would happily tell you to, click up your traces. Or one of the things that happens a lot in Jinteki.net is people will misclick something. They'll put a card in the wrong server, or trash the thing that they didn't intend to, or maybe even take an action and then realize they wanted to do something else. I always tell the person, just back it up, go ahead and give yourself clicks back, take cards back, whatever you need to do, just in the same way that I would in real person. If somebody starts to say, I'm going to play a hedge fund, hold on, no, I'm going to draw first and then play a hedge fund. That, of course, let somebody take that back or redo that. And don't be afraid to ask to do that yourself. That said, anytime you're making a change in the game state, you should be really sure that your opponent knows why you're doing it. If you're giving yourself more clicks or credits because you have to undo something, I usually type, I forgot to do this, can I do it? Or wrong server, can I do that? And people will often respond with NP, which means no problem, or something similar. Generally, you want to try to communicate well with your opponent. So to me, that means playing not super fast, in part because the game has a lot of windows where you're supposed to be able to intervene. And if you play really fast, you can accidentally go past something they wanted to do. Like, let's say, for instance, say you have a card that does damage of some sort. You might res a card and then immediately fire the damage on your opponent, even though they technically have a window in which they could respond. Don't do that. Just wait a moment. It's also a good idea to give a person a chance to do something. If they have a Jackson on the board and you're about to start your turn, you could say anything you want to do to remind them that they could pop their Jackson before you have a chance to play rumor mill or whatever. On the same hand, at the same time, you don't need to go overboard with that. You can kind of read the room a little bit. At the end of the game, you should acknowledge how well the other person did. I almost always say well played or something to that effect. If you're getting really lucky, let's say you run R&D on the first click of the game and you get a card and you run it again and you get another agenda, so you're 2 up. Acknowledging, oh man, that's a tough beat to the other person is a nice thing to do, the same way you would in person. Or honestly, if the other person has a good play, wow, great combo, just like I would in real life. We're trying to enjoy the game. Do that through the chat as well. At the end of the game, you should always say something like well played or good game. GG is GG space WP is the shorthand for that. And I usually stay around and try to talk to the other person. I say what I was trying to do that I wasn't able to, or admire a particular aspect of their deck or a particular part of what they played, or sometimes even if they seem to be really experienced, I might say something like, do you notice gaps in my deck or things that I did that I could learn from? That's a really good way to go. I think I've mentioned that before in my how to learn to play better Netrunner segments. So if you're thinking about trying out Jinteki.net, I encourage you to do so. I will say that all of my advice applies to the casual lobby only. I have not played in the competitive lobby. You will find plenty of excellent players in the casual lobby, people who really know what they're doing, but you'll also find brand new players, people who only have the core set. I keep a couple core set decks ready to go in my Jinteki.net deck lists, so that if there's a core-only player, I can play with them and help them out, help them learn to use the system. Also, don't be afraid if you aren't sure how to do something to ask your opponent how to do something particular in Jinteki.net, because there's a lot that happens on the screen and lots of little buttons that you can push. Get out there and have fun, and if you see Wombat929, let me know, and I'll be happy to play a game with you. You can also reach me on Twitter or the other places that I like to talk about. Segment 3, Flavor of the Week. This week, given that we're talking about etiquette, I thought we would talk about Jeeves model Bioroids. Jeeves model Bioroids is an asset. It's an alliance asset. It says this card costs 0 influence if you have 6 or more non-alliance HB cards in your deck. The first time you spend 3 clicks on the same action each turn, gain 3 clicks. It costs 2 to res and 5 to trash. And the flavor text says, "Very good, sir." And it shows a butler, basically an android butler, with a bow tie and a tray of drinks. So Jeeves is a classic name for a butler, so it's good that it is an image of a butler. By the way, if you've never read any P.G. Wodehouse, you should absolutely read some of the Bertie Wooster Jeeves books. They're fantastic. I also would recommend the Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie series from Britain in the 80s, Jeeves and Wooster, in which they play these seminal characters.
I say, Jeeves, as a matter of interest, what are you doing? I merely ask.
I'm sorting through these clothes. These are for repair and these for discarding.
Oh, wait a second. This white mess jacket is brand new.
I assume it had got into your wardrobe by mistake, sir, or else that it had been placed there by your enemies.
I will have you know, Jeeves, that I bought this in Cannes.
And wore it, sir?
Every night at the casino. Beautiful women used to try and catch my eye.
Presumably they thought you were a waiter, sir.
So I think Jeeves is an excellent card. The art is great, and the name fits the art very well. The theme is perfect for the card, in that the idea that when you're doing something, the butler helps you do it a little bit more. Now, I'm not sure why you have to do 3 of the same things. I can tell mechanically why you have to. I don't know that the butler would necessarily help you do that, but he does just increase your efficiency. In terms of gameplay mechanic, the one thing I would really say is not my favorite is the fact that these are Jeeves model Bioroids, but they are not marked as Bioroid cards. I think it would be really neat if they were, because this would be a Bioroid that's not a program and allows for lots of different kinds of interactions, like the Architects of Tomorrow would be a really interesting card to be able to use on Jeeves. That said, I can understand why they didn't make it that way. It also hurts that Jeeves is unique, which means that it does not work in the face of rumor mill, so you need to be careful of that. All in all, I would say Jeeves is a really solid card that fits the theme of the world very well. The art is cool, if a little creepy. It fits great. I'll say A. A for Jeeves model Bioroids. Conclusion. Well, that wraps up Install from Heap, episode 9. If you have suggestions for future topics or comments on the show, I'd love to hear them. You can send email to brendan@rattleboxgames.com or tweet to rattleboxgames. You can also visit our website, rattleboxgames.com, to subscribe to our newsletter, or follow the link to our forums on BoardGameGeek.com, where my username is, surprise, surprise, Wombat929. I'd always enjoy losing a game of Netrunner to you on Jinteki.net, where my username is also Wombat929. See you next time, but until then, remember, when all your best cards end up in the trash, you can always install from Heap. Today's media clips were from How I Met Your Mother, the Leadercast's Architects of Tomorrow webinar ad, Pretty Woman, and Jeeves and Wooster.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games. The Matter of Drag Dungeons & Dragons podcast recounts the adventures and misadventures of 3 reasonably brave and fairly heroic friends through the fantastic mystical kingdom of Drag. Tune in every other week to follow Raven the Cleric, Bernard the Warlock, Lorne the Rogue, and Rob the Dungeon Master as they stumble toward greatness. Huzzah!